Welcome to Sex, Lies, and Blank Pages with our special guest, Margarita Coale. Welcome.
Welcome.
Great to see
Hello.
everybody. Hi.
It's so wonderful to see. I feel like I get a treat because I get to see you every few months at all of the book signings and everything. But for our audience who does not know of you, would you mind introducing yourself?
No, my name is Margarita Coale. I am an intellectual property lawyer based in Dallas, Texas. And I'm so glad to be doing this instead of being outside because it's like 100. So my kids were disappointed, but here I am. I've had many hats, but my hat over the last 10 years has been helping authors in the business of being an author, right? So there are many aspects. And I really love my job because I've always been a romance reader. So English is my not first language, it's my third. And one of the things you did when you were in high school is you would read silhouettes. That's how old I am. Right? And,
I read them too.
Yeah. I think that the power of romance and the power of hope, and I love being in this industry that there's a lot of strong, independent women who are fulfilling their desires to write in their business. So when I had the opportunity, and Willow has heard this before, but I kind of got into this by mistake, not by mistake. It was just I got a call from an author and she was dealing with an issue. And I gather I was the only one that had said she had hope to get her book back from a publisher that hadn't paid her. And we kind of went through the process. And every time she had a legal problem, even though she had an agent in New York and she had all this, she kept calling me. And I'm like, okay, I don't do that type of law. And she's like, can you retool?
Can you?
Yeah, can you? Can you? Yeah.
Okay, I can do. So I spent, a year taking continuing legal education, kind of talking to people. How do I do this? And this, I kind of let my other practice and do this. And I love it because it's not boring. It's very challenging. I get a lot of interesting questions. Sometimes I get to better read when they have lawyers do stuff. And I'm like, lawyers don't sleep with their clients. Like
they're not supposed to, but in fiction.
So we have this. So I suppose this is my last thing about introducing myself is anything we talk about this, it's just really informal. It's not considered a legal advice. If you have you need legal advice, you need to tell and talk to an attorney and give them your fact patterns. So even though we're going to have a conversation, it's more of a general conversation because a legal advice has to be given by specific facts in your jurisdiction. What is exactly happening? Because the answer might vary from place to place. And for example, this is something that comes up with my clients a lot is, some of them are embarking in a second marriage or first marriage. And they're like, how do I protect my intellectual property? I'm like, well, do you live in a community property state or do you not? Right? Mm-hmm. And how are you going to document it? So the answer has to be very fact specific.
It does. And I do want to tell the audience, even though, copyright lawyer doesn't sound like the most enticing thing, Margarita's got the gossip. If something is going on, she was one of the first people who I message. First, it's usually Monica, because sometimes she's already got the details. And then it's, let's ask Margarita, because she's going to know. Because you talk to so many people in the industry. And you had 40 clients at Book Bonanza.
Yeah.
So
cool. You included.
Yes. As well as me. Yes. So a lot of the ins and outs. You see the contracts. You also see lawsuits that are filed or cease and desists that are sent. So you have this insight, but you also have the legal knowledge. And that's what we lack. Because what is right and what is wrong is not always what is legal and what is illegal. And even if something is illegal, and you think, oh my God, and everybody's telling you, oh my God, you need to sue them, it's not always in your best interest. So that's where having, legal counsel and speaking to legal counsel is really important. So heed that warning from Margarita, even though
I don't things. Yeah, I think a lot of things right now we think moral or that's wrong doesn't mean that's something that you can actually sue over or it can it can go anywhere. That's I think a lot of people are not having
Yeah.
Like having problems lately of their own feelings about something and what is law, so yeah, just take note of that.
Definitely.
You have to understand that the legal system is set up to resolve disputes and at the end of the day give you money, right? That's what business disputes end up being, right? The only time that courts really force things, and I'm not talking about criminal law, right? That's I hope nobody has to talk about criminal law and what we're talking here. I think what you're really
never going to put it out of context for me, but
there have been some situations within the industry. There certainly have, like we don't name names on the podcast, but the woman who faked her death and then they held a fundraiser. That's criminal, right?
Yeah.
But like you're saying, you can only get money in a civil lawsuit. And a lot of the times we don't even give a shit about the money. We either want blood or an apology or the other way around, and both.
Well, I think that a lot of the times people, because they see movies, right, or they see TV programs, and so you see Ally McBeal or you saw Law and Order, and you have this conception of I'm going to do something, and then in 3 months I'm going to have the response I wanted. That's not the way the legal system works. And at the end of the day, I think any lawyer, any good lawyer, will tell you that you have to think about what the ultimate result is, right? So if you're looking at, is there something, and I think in this arena, we're talking about, you talk about how do I protect my rights? What rights do I have? And when are people infringing on those rights? So for example, if you have, and in Willow's situation, for example, we'll have somebody who is using a website name under her name, and we're trying to get it back. Right.
I was like, which situation are we?
No, we have this.
But yes,
website,
yes.
Yeah. So website, somebody went out and they're called cyber squatters, right? They go and buy names that they think are going to be relevant. And so sometimes if you type Willow's name, they'll direct you to this other person's website. And you're like, well, that's kind of weird. Yeah. So you're trying to, but the other person is in a foreign jurisdiction. So we're having to be very cautious in our approach, in the sense of saying, how important is this at the end of the day? Right. Mm-hmm. And that is,
she wanted like $50,000 or something for the domain. It was like, and I was like, isn't that blackmail? I was like, what? I was like, what is going on here? What? Like, but yeah, it's literally, how important is it? Does it really matter? Will their credit card expire before the next automated payment goes through? Like, and
there's a lot of, and so I think a lot of the times people come, so in the business of being an author, and, both with Willow and Stacy being clients, say, how do I protect my rights, right? Mm-hmm. What type of contracts should I be signing? Should I be signing these? How do I make sure that I'm doing the right thing, even from employment of other people, entering contracts with publishers, audiobook contracts? Do I need an agent?
So many people have gotten screwed with contracts, and it's because they don't have a contract lawyer.
Somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, or their agent sucks. Mm-hmm. Like my previous agent, who I signed 10 books that hadn't even been written yet to Audible Escape. And I was told one thing, but what actually came was pennies on the dollar to what I told I'd be getting paid. And at that point, you sign the contract, because what matters is what's written in the contract, not your expectations or something that you talked about over coffee. It's what did you actually sign, though? Because mm-hmm. that's all you can hold up in court. And that sucks. So,
mm-hmm. And it's hard to, keep those separate. Like, you're like, wait, I just got screwed. I should be able to do something. A lot of times you cannot, you signed it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the part is, I think as business people, and I think, and I don't know if this is, and I think people who are younger are not being trained this way. I think there's a generational issue where somehow when people give you something, the first instance my client has is like, well, I'm just going to sign it like it is because I don't want to ask for anything else, or they're going to get mad at me and I'm not going to have a,
or I'm going to lose the contract.
Like that, lose a contract. I think that's a fair. Yeah.
And so I think that the whole idea of pushing back and saying, no, I'm not going to sign this because this is not something that is going to benefit me or my business, or I'm not going to ask questions because they're going to say I'm too aggressive or that I don't know. I think I find that a lot of my clients, including the two on the screen, are becoming they're really good now at asking questions, right?
Mhm.
We're going to have to be good about, is this something I really want to do? And I think also sometimes when I have clients that said, well, I really want a publishing deal. Okay, well, why do you want the publishing deal? Do you want it because you think you're going to reach another audience? Do you want it because you want to say you have a publisher? Or do you want it because you think you're going to get more money? And at the end of the day, lawyers, any lawyer, is only here to give you advice. The business decision ends up being the client's, but it's the client's. And I mean, when I first started, I would have clients that would say, oh, I signed it. I'm like, what do you mean you signed something? Like without showing it, like, why didn't you show me what you were going to sign? And a lot of the times this was this fear, if I take too long, then they're going to take it away. And I think as you get more comfortable in publishing, you see people actually thinking about, okay, but I had one funny comment where a client said, what do you mean they're going to get the book for life? I'm like, because that's what it says in the contract. Like that's what the term is for life. So it says, well, when do I get it back? I'm like,
You know,
Hi, girl.
When you die in the next life.
now there's a lot of little, if you pass away, there's a way that but the issue is you need to know what the contract says. And it doesn't matter what people, I always am
so many people, I'm so sorry. So many people have gotten screwed by the for life. We had a guest on this podcast who discussed there was a website where the publishing company went under and the books were no longer published and none of them received their books back at all ever.
Oh yeah.
They were all just
I think they were able to get their books back at some point, right? Because once the publisher is gone, but it's not as easy. For example, if you have a company that goes out of business and a company that goes out of business, for example, there was this company that did audio out of North Carolina. They disappeared, they dissolved, but the audios were still online. So it took over 2 years for us to be able to prove to Amazon that they no longer existed.
Yeah.
And so I think that you need to be, and a lot of what we see, and I don't know, Stacey and Willa, if you get this sometimes where, you're doing business and somebody's overseas, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they will send you an invoice and they tell you, please pay me on PayPal without being friends, without the security. And, there's a lot of people who are good people and there's some people out there who are not as good people. And all of a sudden, by you doing that, you've taken away all the security and then you pay and they say, well, what can we do? Well, the answer is kind of like nothing, right? How are you going to find the person over there? And you call PayPal and PayPal said, well, you said she was your friend, therefore the money's transferred. And that's kind of one of the questions I think people have to ask. If you're hiring somebody to do, nobody would pay up front without you getting a product back, right?
Right.
Unless you're ordering a Lamborghini or something like that, where you actually know you're going to have a guarantee. If somebody's going to say, I'm going to do something, well, how am I going to safeguard that I'm actually going to get what I said I'm going to get?
I think it's turning your brain more into, and that's hard for me because it doesn't come naturally, is that this is a business and protecting yourself as part of that business and getting people that help you protect yourself, because I'm not good at that. I mean, how many email things that I get that I had to pay all this stuff, and I'm going to Margarita going, what? I thought I paid this. And she's like, that's all like just sham. It's all like people trying to get money out of you. And if I hadn't had her, I would have probably just paid it thinking I owe it, So I think we get really scared when we don't understand. So we do stuff like that, or we don't think it through. Because, or like, I always think like, if you're so afraid that if you take too long on that contract, it's going to disappear, then that contract wasn't good to start with and they didn't really want you. So, it's like, it's readjusting that you're worthy and you need to really start looking at yourself as a mark, like business entity. And that's hard for someone like me. I know Willow comes a lot easier. It is
It
not.
used to be hard for me. Then I got screwed
Yeah.
over a bunch, and now I'm like, it's business.
Now it's
Everything
business,
is
baby.
it's business. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, then you're in the wrong business. Like
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
all it is. I would like to switch gears to
Yeah.
something spicy.
Yeah, well, before you go to spicy, two things everybody should think about, all authors in business should be thinking about, am I registering my copyrights?
Mhm.
And do I have something that I need to analyze as a trademark? Right?
Right.
There are two different things, and there's too many, but that's something you should be thinking, right? Because
And
yeah,
before we go to the spicy, just off the trademark, just because it happened a lot. What about trademarking when people trademark words or
Oh,
like
like
that kind of thing?
cocky?
Like,
When they try
like
to copyright a font that can't be
or take
copywritten, but they tell
titles
people they did.
yes, like how do you because you hear that and then people respond like, oh my God. And they were taking cocky off the word cocky off books and they were like, and I'm like, whoa, wait, what?
Yeah.
It's funny how like
For
people
in
you
the
trademark
audience.
words.
Yeah, well, people in the audience who don't understand the reference. A few years ago, there was a lawsuit in which an author claimed that she had copywritten the word cocky for a title and had reached out to several authors to remove the word entirely from their titles, and then claimed that she owned the font and had copywritten it in this font, and that other fonts were too similar, to find out that the font creator made it so that you could not copyright that font. And I believe there was a lawsuit. A lawsuit was filed, and I think RWA is the organization that funded it, I believe.
it was the Author Guild. And I think just a couple of quick questions. So you can copyright your words, you can copyright images, you trademark pen names, you trademark series names. What was really unusual about it is somebody trying to trademark a word and saying, I'm the only person that can use the word cocky in the titles, in the this, and sent takedown notices. And this was I would say, a mistake that happened in the trademark office, that they didn't understand what she was doing or how she was going to and this is all public, right? They were going to use it. So I think when you're thinking about, and that's an extreme bad use, right? It's just like saying that somebody is saying, well, I'm going to trademark the word aliens. Well, no, you're not going to trademark the word aliens. And then I'm the only person that's going to be able to use the word aliens in a romance title. Well, no. Now, if you have a series of books that has a very specific and unique series name, right? It might be worth an analyzing. Do I really want to protect that so somebody else doesn't go ahead and call it the same series name, so people won't be confused? Because copyright protects the author of the work, right? And trademark is supposed to protect the public. So if I go and ask for a Coke, I am going to receive something that is Coke. And that's why people will ask you, is Pepsi okay? Because it's not a generic.
It's not Coca-Cola.
No,
yeah.
it's not.
And it's never okay.
I know there's some people who love Pepsi, but so I think the thing to look at that. So when you have a product, you want to protect that product, right? Rolex, so do you have a product in books that is not the written word, because that's copyrighted, and your exclusive image cover, right? And all of the stuff where you have, is it something that you need to go to the trademark office and say, I want to protect it? And then you have to prove it. And, both of you have gone through the process. Copyright is automatic. It's $65. It's a no-brainer, right? You have a book, you have to register within 90 days to get all the benefit. If you haven't registered it, you do. But trademark is a very different analysis.
So for authors who just heard you say it costs $65 to copyright, and in their head, they're thinking as soon as it's published, it's copywritten. The difference is, tell me if I'm right or wrong, that if you pay that $65 and somebody does infringe upon your copyright, you are then entitled to the finances that they may have gathered during that infringement. Whereas if you didn't pay that $65, it would just be taken down, but you're not getting any money. Or is that the basics of it, sort of, depending?
Well, so a couple of years ago, the US Supreme Court said that for you to be able to file a copyright infringement claim, you have to have a registered trademark. So a registered copyright, I'm sorry. So that means you take your book, you send it to the copyright office, you pay them $65, and you get a registration number. If you don't have that, then you're only entitled to damages under common law, which is a lot harder to get. And what is the most costly thing that would come is attorney's fees. So if you have a registered copyright, right,
Yeah.
and you also have statutory fees for every time there's infringement. If you don't have a registered copyright, then you're not going to be able to access any of those. And you will not be able, under the US Supreme Court guidance, to file a copyright infringement in that way. So yes, so when I say it's a no-brainer is it has to be, remember, the Copyright Act protects original works of art in a specific medium. So you have to publish it, right? Now there's a pre-publication way of doing it, but let's assume that it's like and people do it for books that, Harry Potter was pre-registered, right? Because it was done points ago. But most of us in this industry, you usually are producing your books, right, that are going to be published within 6 months. So you don't have enough time to do the pre-registration and then go back and do the registration. But you do have, the moment it goes live or it gets printed, you have the ability to register it because it's through the Copyright Office. You pay the $65 and then you have your date of registration.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume that it's really easy. I've never done it. You do all mine.
Yes.
But, yeah.
It's just, I think you just have to make sure you have it set up correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you understand who owns the copyright, whether it's you or whether it's your company, and you have everything that is set up. Because one of the things I think people don't understand is the copyright and the trademark offices are open to the public, right? It's not a secret what you're registering. I mean, otherwise it's kind of silly to have a registration that's not open to the public. So whatever you put out there, that means anybody can go in and look it up. So your address, if you have a pen name, what your real name would be if you're using your real name. So there's a lot of things to think about as to how you want the registration out there. Right.
So in protecting, this kind of goes off, I think, what we want to eventually get to, protecting an artist's work. How are those laws now going to be translated through the AI?
That was my spicy thing. Yes. There we go.
That's what I said. I think that's what we're trying to head to.
Yeah.
AI is very again, it is everywhere now. It was supposed to be for menial jobs, but it seems to just be coming for art.
It's just
instead.
art. It's just art. But I have this thought in my head that I thought was smart. And I was like, this is how I would think that it should go. And then I thought, if we have a lawyer who knows their stuff, you could make fun of me after I tell you what I think. Yeah. So this is what I think, right? So we have AI, right? And you can type in, write me a story that sounds like Willow Winters. That's a mafia about 50,000 words where they're enemies to lovers and also has these tropes, right? And then some of the text might read like mine. And you have a lawsuit that I know Stephen King is a part of. I don't know the state of it currently, where there are I forget which AI program or whatever it is, but they have filed claiming that their works were available on either because they were plagiarized or not plagiarized, either because they were plagiarized or because they were put on these, what is it called? Like as if it was a public work, but it wasn't a public work, that they actually had copyright over it. And they can prove, like Getty's Images can prove that Getty's images were used because AI spat out the watermark on the art because they used so much of it, even though this is supposed to be copywritten. So the AI shouldn't have been able to learn from these works that were illegally available, and therefore AI used them. So me and my little brain, I was like, well, why doesn't the government just say these individuals filed claims? These were on the open web is what I was looking for. These were on the open web. They weren't supposed to be there. This AI is saying that it was trained on the open web from this date to this date. Therefore, they must compensate these artists, these owners of these copyrights, a certain percentage of whatever it is they're generating. And if they can't generate income to provide for the people who had their work taken, they should not exist. Either pay people who we know for a fact you used in order to create it, or go away, which would also make the AI now you have to charge in order to generate that income, which in our commercial financial ecosystem would make it less likely to be used. And therefore it gives the artist a little bit of a time to catch up and the law time to catch up. Right? Is this dystopia? Does it make sense? Doesn't it make sense?
We were all looking at the thumbs up that popped up above your head.
Oh, there's a thumbs up.
Yeah.
There.
How did it? There it is. And now there's fireworks. The big finale.
That was
I don't know what's going
your
on.
brain, because what you said was just like, wow.
I couldn't sleep. This was a few months ago. I almost text you at 3 a.m, Margarita, and luckily I did not. Because that would have been
You
very
can always text me. I've told you, if I'm awake, I'll answer. If I'm not awake, I'm not answering.
But wouldn't you think that for the government that's supposed to protect the people and they're supposed to enforce, I know, right? But they're supposed to enforce these copyrights, that should be a logical state of affairs when something like this is occurring?
I think you're touching in a lot of, there's a lot of pieces that it's not as easy put together, right?
Right.
Because the assumption, however, you have is that money would compensate people from having their work being used, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe, yes, they would, but at the end of the day, when you have your work being now in a generative AI context, it's there, right? Mm-hmm. So that means that
it can't be unstolen.
It can't be unstolen. So that's I think legally the question is, what is the right answer, right? And unfortunately, you guys have to deal with this all the time, and we deal with this with Etsy sometime. Right now, there's a lot of fan fiction authors that are dealing with their books being binded by people and sold for this enormous amount of money, where they keep sending them takedown notices, and the other people say, "Oh, I'm just charging you the cost of, buying it." No, it's not charged $500 for that. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that you have this where the law, unfortunately, has not caught up because law and legislation is so slow. But I think as the law catches up, one thing we all have to do when you're talking about artificial intelligence, I think you need to distinguish between artificial intelligence we are already using, right?
Like spell check,
the grammar check, that AI is different. That's something that you're using to allegedly create original work of art that you then want to protect. Mm-hmm. So generative AI, I think it's very complex. And I see this a lot, for example, with clients who are being approached to saying, would you like to try this new medium, right? Mm-hmm. And so we want to take your stories and we want to make them into films, into anime, into cartoons, into this. But to do that, we're going to use generative AI. And I have been advising my clients, the Copyright Office in the United States has been very clear that the only protection that the Copyright Act gives is to work created by humans. Mm-hmm. So anytime you start adding that AI component, you are risking, we don't know where it's going to end, but, original work of art by a human is not one that was created by generative AI.
And could you imagine, just so that the audience can get like a proper grasp on the horrors of what could happen to an artist, how horrible it would be, is if you signed a contract legally binding with a company who says, we're going to make your story into a comic and we're going to use AI to do it. And this comic blows up. And then they say, you're not actually getting money for this because it's not actually copywritten, or some nature, something of that nature. Or they don't even, there is no contract that's even signed. Your work just becomes a comic. But because that can't be copywritten because it was made from a robot, like there's all of these people consuming your work of art in a different form. Maybe you agree to it, maybe you didn't, but you don't get a dime for it. It is just now out there for free. And I would just cry. I would be beside myself if like I worked this hard and I have my breakout moment and you don't get a dime for it.
Well, think about, is it Scarlett Johansson that they were that
Yes.
Her voice, yeah.
her voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think technology is awesome in so many ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are disease that they can do. Robots can operate without leaving big scars. So I think we have to think about it. However, how do we protect at the end of the day? Because if you do not have artists, if you don't have creators, right? That's what copyright, patent law, trademark law, at the end of the day is trying to protect. We want humans as a species to think about different mediums to express themselves and about having different ways, and they have to have a way to actually make a living at it, because nobody's going to sit in their house writing books. So people then just take them up in the internet and put them for free, and you're like, okay, well, no, we all want to be paid for our work. And an artist's work, right, is that, I mean, it's the same. I look at it this way. Why was the music industry so aggressive, right, in trying to make sure they get compensation for their use? Because otherwise, what is the incentive for the artist to create music? So what's the incentive for people to write books that people want to read and continue the intellectual discourse, whether fiction or nonfiction? So when you're looking at a contract, and I always hesitate, and I actually got a question the other day, say, what's your position about contracts that have AI component? I said, I have to look at the contract, right? What does the contract say? And I know some people will say, oh, I'm never going to use it and I don't want to see it. And I think that until we understand better, right, what's coming out of it, it's good to have a healthy dose of saying, do I really want to be the guinea pig? And one example that came was, and this was in the past couple of years, maybe it was a year and a half ago, that somebody created a comic where it was her story, but for the actual illustrations, she used some AI component. And, you know, she would say to the AI, okay, can you do this? Can you do that? And she modified it. When she registered it, she didn't disclose to the US Copyright Office that she had used AI to create those images. So when she got the registration, she went ahead and made a big public statement and said, by the way, I got registration of this comic that was used in part creating AI. At that point, the US Copyright Office says, okay, first of all, you didn't disclose it. Mm-hmm. Second of all, what is the position we have? And that's where they shared, and both Stacy and you and Willow are in my list. You know, I will send out sometimes randomly, this is an interesting thing that happened. And that was one of the things. The US Copyright says copyright protection only applies to original work of art created by humans. A machine is not human. Yeah. So,
and if it's not copywritten, somebody else could put the same comic up and generate income from it, and there's nothing that you can do.
Well, it's going to be really difficult to protect, I think. And the other problem you have is not only that, but is that your work has gotten into these, you know, generators, right? Mm-hmm. And is feeding yourself. So, and I find it really interesting. So universities are having this trouble, right? Because you have, you know, kids who are using it, high schools, you know, they have. Yeah. So what they've done now is in college essays, they've gone to saying, describe yourself in 5 words, which is really hard unless you know who you are, right? Mm-hmm. So they've gone away from the give me 100-word essay on who you are to 5 words.
Yeah. And they do have Yeah, they have programs too that you can see this is like 80 something
Yep.
percent AI or 12%
They
AI.
run it through.
Yeah, and high
Adobe or
schools.
one of those now basically put out a thing saying, if you use this, we're using your work to train our AI. You know, it's like every
Mhm.
app
Oh
now
my
is
God,
basically
yeah.
just ripping us authors or artists and that's what I don't understand. Why is the music business, why were they be able to come together and basically, I remember it was Napster that they went against. It was but none of us, I mean, as authors or artists, we seem to be able to do that same thing as
We're
fight for ourselves and to
so
come together.
unregulated. Our industry is very unregulated. There's nobody in the higher up to
Even
go
getting
to.
pirate books off of like
Yeah.
website, it's almost impossible. Like, so I just feel like, why can't we have that same thing? Why the music industry came together and was just like, we've had enough. You're going to pay us, these artists for their time, their, talent, but we don't have that even
Yet.
remotely. And
We don't have it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's
Okay.
manifest it. The new moon is in a
Okay.
couple days.
Sure.
We're manifesting a Napster
In a couple days
reality.
it'll happen. Okay.
You never
I have
know.
a quick question.
I'm-
Do they rescind the copyright then when they find out? Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, they did. And now when you file a copyright application, there is a place where you have to swear under penalty of perjury, that what you're submitting is an original work of art,
Good.
and also that it does not involve AI. Or you have to, like, you can register work that has AI as long as you exclude it, right? So this is original work of art. This is not original work of art. It's like when you're registering something that, for example, a lot of my clients like to have specific art being made, and the art belongs to the artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That made the art. So you can't register that as your art unless you got an assignment, you paid for it, it is now yours to use. So you're the owner. Then you exclude that and say, okay, chapters 1, 3, 5, and 7 have specific art, and this art doesn't belong to Willow Winters or to Stacey Brown. This belongs to, this other people. So it's excluded from the registration.
Okay.
I think that the bigger problem that, at least, with RWA kind of imploding after what happened a couple of years ago, I don't think there's a strong voice, at least in the romance community, that brings forth the, what are our interests, and is our interest going to be like with publishers, and like, for example, things that I think are coming up a lot is, when you hire an agent, when you hire a translator, when you deal with a publishing company, what is their position in AI? And do you include something in your contract that basically says you represent that no AI is going to be used? For example, in covers, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you hire somebody, and like, I want to understand why all models now look like Henry Cavill. Like, they all, like, you see them at some covers and you're like, that's like, it's Superman.
The same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's too perfect. It's too perfect.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of it depends, because also, however, having an exclusive images, it's expensive because people take time, money, and effort. And sometimes people are thinking of things about, oh, well, I want to do that. And we saw that a lot, for example, on TikTok, where people were taking reels of something that was copyrightable, like something like the NFL is very specific that all their film stuff, and people were putting, and I think as people thought about it, saying, okay, should we be doing this? Is this something, if we want our work to be protected, do we need to respect other people's work?
And that might come back to what we were talking about at the beginning. What is right and what is wrong, or what is moral and what is immoral? Is there a law that makes it legal or illegal, or is the law creeping up behind you? Is it never going to happen? And a lot of people don't know, especially on TikTok. There's so much misinformation and no education, and people are just doing it until the hammer drops.
Well, it's going to be an interesting, I mean, there's a couple of lawsuits involving, TikTok, a couple of lawsuits involving the use of AI. There's a couple of lawsuits involving, and for example, it goes back, however, what does copyright protect? Which is original works of art. Copyright does not protect ideas. Copyright does not protect dragons. Copyright doesn't protect magicians. Copyright doesn't, Superman, a Man of Steel. I mean, what does it protect? So I think once we analyze it, what is it that I'm gonna, in your author hat, I want to protect my original work. And then I want to make sure that I am helping people protect their original work. And I remember I was in a conversation once in a conference where there was somebody talking about TikTok, and she was talking about how she was using her personal account to promote her business because she didn't want to pay for music. And then at the end, I asked her, I said, so you would be okay with somebody taking your books, putting it on the sites, and people reading them there? She's like, no, but that's my work. I said, well, what about the music, right? That you're using because you don't want to pay for it. So I think a lot of the times we have to think about, as business people, I need to treat others as I want to be treated myself. And if I want to, and maybe it means that you can't get 20 exclusive covers, but then you say, okay, I'd rather have 5 exclusive covers that I know are ethically generated than
And make
20
sure.
I'm not sure where they're from.
The problem with our industry, though, and I feel like we could have a completely different podcast, like another episode on this, and we might want to, is that in our industry, money comes high and money drops low. It is a roller coaster ride, much like all-star athletes. You have this huge fame and all of this wealth, and then it's all gone. And for a lot of people, they don't understand taxes. They don't understand you're not getting paid for 60 or 90 days, but now you owe all of the interest on all of this, or, and they don't know. And when they hit that low, morality does seem to go out the door, or they see other people doing it. And they're like, well, if she can do it and she's beloved and she's in the top 10
and she's getting away with it,
nobody seems upset that she's doing it. Now I'm going to do it, and nobody can be mad at me either. But, the FTC does not give a shit if you get likes on your TikTok posts, right? They don't care. I do think this might be, do you have any final thoughts? And maybe we could wrap this up and maybe do another one. Would you come back for another episode?
Yes. And we
we can talk all of this stuff forever.
Yes. I think one of the things to think about is that it's okay to ask questions, right? And you might not agree with what it is, but when I first started years and years ago, how in Amazon you had the like and dislike buttons, and you can do that.
I remember that.
And I have clients, or the ones that were saying that you have to disclose. For example, you can review each other's books as long as you disclose, hey, I'm Willow Winters. I am going to review Stacey Marie Brown, who's my friend, and I'm going to give her 5 stars because I love this book because of this. You can do that. It's the disclosure. So there were some authors that were running contests, were saying, hey guys, I need you to do me a favor. I'm going to give a $25 gift card to anybody who shows me that they went and disliked these reviews. And you're like, okay, well, the terms of service of Amazon are very clear. You as an author shouldn't do anything that manipulates the result, right? So I heard a lot of authors would say, but everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, isn't that what our mom used to tell us? If everybody's going to jump off the bridge, do you?
Yes, I jumped off the bridge.
So I think it's good to have questions, and you can have a different interpretation, right? But I think asking the question of saying, well, just because everybody's doing it, first of all, who's everybody? And second of all, is this something that really benefits? Because at the end of the day, we have these safeguards in place, and the safeguards kind of move. And I think what Stacey and Willow and Colleen were talking about is right now with AI and even with the business of regulation, doctors have organizations that control them. maybe not after the Supreme Court is now deciding to take over the administrative stuff, but lawyers have their, CPAs have their, I think authors and the Author Guild tries to do but the Author Guild has fiction, nonfiction, small, big, and it's kind of hard. We don't have an organization that you said, okay, these are the 10 things you as an author should do. It's like, think about it, the NFL players. NFL players, come, make a lot of money for a very short period of time. And it wasn't until Robert Staubach really started kind of thinking about it. It's like, how do you invest your money? If you get, or if you ever want to watch about Basketball Wives, right? Where these guys get these enormous contracts and then they have to leave the $80 million mansion because
they can't afford the taxes.
They can't afford that.
Yeah.
And so I think that but there are a lot of resources. And I think another thing we have is
Wait, is that on a show called Basketball Wives?
Yeah, there's a Basketball Wives.
I never watched it, but I saw an ad for it, and that is something I would so watch. Thank you. I'm about to binge that. It's probably on Netflix.
So I think one of the things that thinking about is there is no institutional knowledge. And all of us, we want to think we're special and that we're different. And I think the mentoring, I really like, the idea of doing things like this where people are mentoring and hearing. Because it's saying, okay, do you have an LLC? Have you been copywriting your work? What are you doing with your contracts? How are you doing? And that is institutional memory that kind of goes to it. And what you're saying, look, you could have 3 really good years, but I don't know, what if people all of a sudden only want to read rom-coms? And you're right, dark romance. Well, maybe you need to start thinking about, how do I do these? And the assumption is, oh, I had one bestseller. That means that every single book I publish is going to be the number one. Unless you're
wish.
Yeah, right.
Unless it's Harry Potter, right? Or for example, think about the books. E.L. James, which is a lovely person, and it's absolutely. I mean, her books were hitting. And she hasn't been a list in a long time. And it doesn't mean that every time she publishes, she's going to be number one, right? Or Nora Roberts, or James Patterson, or John Grisham. When you talk about all these names of people who were there. So the wrap up would be, I think it's really important to think about these things, to ask questions, and both Stacy and Willow have heard me say this. The only power you have to say is no. If somebody comes and they're pressuring into something and they tell you, don't talk to an attorney, or you don't need to know that, or you need to trust me, and you need to
That's
sign
a red flag. Red flags. Yeah.
No, I don't. And you know what? Maybe you missed the opportunity of the lifetime, but it's more likely that you're probably in a really good position of not having missed that opportunity. Because if they really wanted you and professional people don't speak that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, professional people don't speak that way. Same thing with, when you have Hang Lee, who's a great designer. She has a contract. She wants you to look at the contract. She wants you to, and she will take comments if you have them, right? If you have specific, nobody's going to say, no, I'm not going to work with you because you ask a question.
Mm-hmm. It's something
At
that
least anybody on the up and up.
Yeah, I think that also goes to us. We are predominantly women in this industry. And we are, that is something that we struggle with, I think, is that the fear of rejection and, you are disposable and there is somebody right behind you if you're not going to agree to this. And that's some kind of subliminal messaging within our culture and some other things that just as women and as we grow and we realize boundaries and we realize this is a business, and then it hits on personal things too.
Let's see. So I think Stacy and I have worked in a couple of contracts together, and now we know each other. And I think she knows that the people you need to work with, you need to trust that they're telling you, and at least they're telling you. And I think I've told this to both of you, Stacy and Willow. It's your decision, but you should know what you're signing at the end of the day, right? If you say, I want to sign this, you just need to know what the consequence of it is.
I like to imagine the worst case scenario. Am I going to be okay? If the worst case scenario happens, am I going to be okay? Because I have to feed 3 kids. I have a dozen people I've employed. My money actually, that matters for a lot of people. And if the worst case scenario happens, am I going to be able to, look everybody in the eye or not? So I don't sign a lot of contracts.
My rule was whatever Margarita told me to do.
But you have questions, right? And you had a purpose at the end of the day. You had the goal of where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And you know what the difference was, and when we had a force majeure issue, and when they came and asked us, said, okay, do we give them 6 extra months or not? And sure, we give them 6 extra months.
And we fought for things that I think that guy was not expecting, women. I think he was quite taken back by, we were stronger in what we came back with. We were like, no, we're not going to settle. And that in this industry, you do find that, and we were like, nope, we're not settling for that. And that was hard at me for first, because you're coming with this opportunity that you think like, oh God, if I do counter that, they're going to be like, oh, screw you, we're done. But I realized, like, stay steady and stay proud. And I did. And I was so thankful that I was like, nope, I'm not bending to this, because it's so easy to sign a contract because you want that money right now, you want that fame right now, and it might just turn on you.
And there's a lot of hope that you're going to sign the deal that's going to change your life, right? As opposed to working 10 years to become an overnight success. Like, everybody thinks there's one thing that's going to be my big break, and so it's hard to risk the possibility when that is what the mentality is.
Well, and there are going to be contracts, and there are going to be situations where you're going to take a risk, right? And sometimes it might end up being, I think if you go back to the apps, right, that 4 years ago, everybody's like, I need to jump on the app right now because it might be the next best thing ever. And it turned out that it didn't pan out to a lot of people, right?
The way some of the worst for a lot of people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, asking the question, what does a subsidiary mean? Like, no, we're taking that language out. And I think that that's one of the things talking. So I would love to come back and visit with you guys. I know you have.
Yeah. I think that we should, because we could definitely talk about a lot more. But for everybody listening, follow, subscribe, and let us know if you have any questions that you want answered, or what our other topics should be.
Maybe bringing those questions in, we could bring to Margarita and ask her.
Definitely. So, although keep in mind, she's not your lawyer, and you should still seek advice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. I have you well trained.
Right. I try. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.